Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Stand Alone. Listen, when I talk about going from ordinary to extraordinary, and when I say that you have to be able to stand alone, there are a few guests that I have thoroughly researched that really embody what that means in their books, in the way they live, by their career. And today we are in the presence of someone extraordinary. So, I want to introduce everyone. In our presence today, we have RICH DIVINEY, a retired Navy SEAL commander. This is powerful. Imagine being in a group of the most elite warriors in the world, but then being a leader of leaders. That's powerful. Not only that, but you retired and then you got involved in leadership and optimal performance, which is my forte. I know we both share a love for neuroscience, which I want to dive into today also. But what's impressive is that you speak in and dealt with over 5,000 organizations, including American Airlines, the 49ers, you've worked with them. What I really want to talk about today with you, Rich, first, thank you for your service. Thank you for allowing me to do what I get to do in this great country because of your service and clearing a path for us to be able to perform. And I want to open it up by just asking you some really great questions that are relevant to today. Because, Rich, what I've come to understand being like 2 decades in business is that there's so many people that want to be great, that want to stand out, but they really sometimes don't make the cut. And when I started reading your book, guys, this is a book that was written a few years ago, but if you haven't read it, you need to get your hands on this. Because as soon as I started reading this, Rich, I'm like, there you go. There you go. There are things that I can't describe that are in people, that are missing in people. And your book starts to dissect this. So in today's world, Rich, where people are just like, reading a quote, then we're on to the next one, having a brief conversation, and we're on to the next conversation, we're not diving in deep enough. Mm-hmm. And your book does such a beautiful job of that. What made you start to look at this, not from a level of skill, but what made you dive into what is, and you use the word attribute, which I love. What is it in a person that's going to predict if they're successful or not?
Yeah, well, first of all, Sabrina, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and I love that. I love that we can have this conversation. That's, I guess, the benefit of COVID is that we all got more comfortable on Zoom, so we can actually have these conversations. That so yeah, the question the answer to that question, the impetus of that started when I was still in the SEAL teams, and when I was in the SEAL teams, I was put in charge of one of our the selection assessment course for one of our very premier SEAL commands, a very specialized command. And at this particular command, what happened was you had Navy SEALs from regular SEAL commands apply to come to this command to actually go through the selection process. So you had to have top stellar reviews, you had to have top performance, you had to go through a board process, physical tests, all that stuff. And that was just to get you into the 9-month selection process. And then we put guys through the 9-month selection process, and only about 50% made it through. And so now you're thinking there's 50% of these top dudes are not making it through this program. And the question that was posed to me when I took over training was, hey, what's going on? Because the reasons why are not sitting well, right? We were saying things like, well, the guy couldn't shoot very well or couldn't scuba dive very well or whatever. These are experienced SEALs. So they obviously know how to shoot. They obviously know how to skydive. What else is going on? And so that prompted me to look at performance from a different optic. And what I recognized was that we tend to look at performance from the visible things we can see and measure and test. And that is, if we do that, missing a huge part of the performance picture. I'll give you a quick example of this because, and I'll go back to basic SEAL training. For your audience, those who may or may not know, basic SEAL training is called BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition / SEAL Training. It's held in San Diego, California. This is where regular sailors go to try out to be Navy SEALs. It's a 6-month course. It's a 90% attrition rate, right? So only 10% of the guys who start make it through. And I went through SEAL training, basic SEAL training in 1996, so a while back. It's arduous, right? I mean, you spend hundreds of hours running around with big heavy boats in your head. You spend hundreds of hours exercising with 300-pound telephone poles and running around with those things on your shoulders, hundreds of hours freezing in the surf zone. And at the time I was doing the work I was doing, I'd been a Navy SEAL for about between 12 and 13 years. I had already done hundreds of combat missions overseas. I'd done thousands of training evolutions. And one of the things that occurred to me was never on one of those missions or training evolutions did I ever carry a heavy boat on my head or a 300-pound telephone pole. So what they were doing to us in SEAL training wasn't training us in the skills to be Navy SEALs. They were trying to tease out these qualities, these attributes. The other example I'll give is, and this is a story that happened prior to me getting there. The story goes, that a kid showed up to SEAL training in San Diego. And he went up to the instructors and said, I want to be a Navy SEAL. And they said, okay, well, you need to pass the swim test. And they said, okay. So they took him out to the pool, and the swim test was basically, swim 25 meters to one end, 25 meters back. The kid goes to do his test. He jumps in the pool, and he immediately sinks to the bottom. And he starts walking across the bottom of the pool to one end, and then he touches that end, and he walks across the bottom of the pool back to the other end. And he comes up, and he's gasping for air, nearly drowning. And the instructor looks at him and says, what the heck are you doing? And the kid, who's still catching his breath, looks at the instructor and with dead honesty says, I'm sorry, instructor, I don't know how to swim. And the instructor pauses for a second and looks at the kid and says, that's okay, we can teach you how to swim. Now, why did the instructor say that? The instructor said that because if this kid had the qualities, the attributes to show up to Navy SEAL training, one of the most elite maritime units on the planet, and he didn't know how to swim, he knew that he had everything inside of him to be a Navy SEAL. Teaching him the skill of swimming was going to be the easy part. So this is when we lean on attributes. Our attributes are these qualities inherent to us that tell us, does this person have the qualities to do the job, do the task, do whatever the niche is? And the last thing, and I know we're going to get into the distinctions between the two, but the last thing I'll say about attributes is, you kind of said it. Some people succeed, some people don't. I think of us as human beings the same way I think of automobiles, kind of like the movie Cars. Okay, which I love the movie. It's not because my kids made me watch it 1,000 times. It's because it's actually a genuinely good movie. But we're all automobiles. But some of us are Jeeps, and some of us are Ferraris, and some of us are SUVs. And there's no judgment there, because the Jeep can do things the Ferrari can't do, and the Ferrari can do things the Jeep can't do. But I'm always about, hey, why don't we lift our hood and figure out what we actually are? Because if we're finding friction in our lives, it might be because we're a Jeep that's trying to run on a Ferrari track, or a Ferrari trying to run on a Jeep track. And these attributes start to articulate what kind of vehicle we are, and therefore what kind of track we should be running on.
Yeah, one of the things that I love when I have conversations with my guests, Rich, is that I feel like I already know you, but I've never met you. But I feel like I already know you, and we talk the same language, because I say this to my team all the time. And I use the exact analogy that you just used. And when you say this, I love what you're saying. And I would love for you to dive deeper and bring your expertise into this, because I've always made the error of focusing on skill so much. And then what I started to do over the years is I started looking at character. And then when I would look at people, I didn't have the right words to describe it the way you describe it so beautifully in your book. But really what you're talking about is that skill we can train in people. So I'm not really worried about the skills that I have to teach you to do well in business. But really what I'm looking at is, do you have the character traits? So can you touch on this? Because my big question, I think for every business in the world, what we're asking ourselves today is, can we teach character? Can we train character? And you answer it beautifully at the end. And I don't know if you want to give people the answer to that, but that's really the billion-dollar question right now.
Yeah. Well, and the answer is yes, maybe. but
I love that. I love good answer. Explain.
But we have to change the wording a little bit. Train is the wrong word, or teach is the wrong word. Here's why. And let's give the audience a breakdown of the difference between skills and attributes. Okay. Skills are not inherent to our nature. In other words, none of us are born with the ability to ride a bike or throw a ball or drive a car. Okay. We're trained to do those things. We're taught to do those things. Okay. Skills also direct our behavior in known and specific environments. So here's how and when to throw a ball or ride a bike or drive a car. Because skills are very visible, skills are also very easy to assess, measure, and test. We can see how well anyone does any one of those things. We could put scores around it. We could put stats around it. This is why we often get seduced by skills when we're picking teams or even evaluating performance, because they're the easy button. They're the visible stuff. You can put skills on a resume, okay? This is why we get seduced by this. The problem with skills is they don't tell us how we're going to show up in stress, challenge, and uncertainty. Because in an unknown environment, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to apply a known skill. This is when we lean on our attributes, okay? Attributes, on the other hand, are elemental. In other words, all of us are born with levels of patience, situation awareness, adaptability, okay? Now, we can certainly develop those things over time and experience as we grow, right? But you can see levels of this stuff in very small children. Anybody who's ever had kids or been around kids will know that there are 1.5-year-olds who are patient and there are 1.5-year-olds who are impatient, right? So there's a nature-nurture element to attributes that has to be considered. Attributes don't direct our behavior. Attributes inform our behavior. They tell us how we're going to show up to an environment. So for example, my son's levels of perseverance and resilience informed the way he showed up when he was learning the skill of riding a bike, and he was falling off a dozen times doing so, okay? So they inform our behavior. And then finally, because they're difficult to see, they're very difficult to measure and assess and test. How are you supposed to measure someone's levels of patience or adaptability, okay? They show up the most visibly and viscerally during times of challenge, uncertainty, and stress. But when we understand these attributes, these qualities, we're really talking about, and so a lot of organizations call these soft skills, right? But they're not really skills, right? They're actually, they're character qualities, they're character traits that start to define our performance at very elemental levels. And here's what is really the kicker for businesses, and I know you've experienced this as well. We're often seduced by these skills, so we end up creating what we call dream teams, right? We get the team with the best graphics designer, best marketer, best salesperson, best whatever, right? And oftentimes what happens is those teams operate great when things are going great, okay? But as soon as things go sideways, as soon as things they don't go as planned, things fall into the unknown, oftentimes the teams turn toxic. And we all know the highest performing teams on the planet are not the teams that only perform when things are going great. They're the teams that perform when things don't go great, right? And to create those teams, you have to create teams based on these attributes, not just skills. All skill development is underpinned by attributes, right? So this is why now skills do matter. I know in any business, and anybody who's listening to this, there are some baseline skills depending on the business. If you're going to hire an accountant, they probably should know something about accounting, right? I mean, so there's some baseline skills, but we don't need to focus on the best. What we need to focus on these qualities, because that's what show the dark horses. That attributes show potential. I always say skills tell us what is, attributes tell us what could be, right? So when we start thinking about attributes, you start seeing people with potential, and you start picking out those dark horses, and you get some really rock stars if you get the right attributes.
I love this. This is my forte. You know, when I started doing this standalone brand, I really was like, I wanted to describe what it really takes to be great, because I think so many people are like, I want to be great. And then when people actually find out, like, can you deal with uncertainty? Yeah. I love how the Navy SEALs train people, and I gravitate towards this because you talk about this in your book. You give an example of someone wanting to fight Chuck Liddell and said, if I can name the place, let's go down, you know, and it was so genius because where you guys train is the most volatile place on planet Earth, where a lot of people can't survive. So that's why, you know, when you look to necessarily win, you can do it in environments that people have not prepared for, which I really love. And you say this
real quick on that, because this is so I'm writing the second book right now, so it's an excuse for us to talk again. The second book is called Masters of Uncertainty, and the reason why I'm calling it that is because this is how I define the Navy SEALs. I've always defined the Navy SEAls. It's not about the shooting or the skydiving or the scuba diving. It's about the fact that we are individuals and teams that can drop into complex, chaotic environments and start performing, right? This is what Masters of Uncertainty do. And I think there are specific things you have to understand about yourself to become a master of uncertainty. One of those is you have to understand who you are at your most raw. This is what the attributes do for us. I am very interested, I always have been, in helping people understand who they are at their most raw. That means, because we've always heard it, the real when the you know what hits the fan, the real us shows up. Well, who's that real us? Because that real us, if we understand that person, now we understand our basic engine components, and we understand our performance at levels that are beyond just every day. And it really is a superpower.
So let's go back, right? Because you gave a great example of one of your mentors. And I think this is why, especially even if you're a parent, I have 3 small children, and I'm always aware of what they're seeing in me and how I respond to things. And you gave a beautiful example of one of your mentors, Hank, where he was able to overcome many things because of spoiled milk. If you could describe this to the audience, because a lot of us, we have been grown in a certain way by what we've observed, and people don't understand the leadership capacity that they have in their own worlds.
Mhm.
And if we could become aware of it, we can nurture people to make better decisions day to day.
Yeah, 100%. So Hank is a dear friend of mine. He served with me in the teams as my troop chief. We're still friends to this day. I had coffee with him last week. And really, Hank's story. I'm not going to spoil the story for people who read the book, but Hank's story is one of deep perseverance and resilience,
Mhm.
which are 2 attributes. So he's actually featured in both the perseverance chapter and the resilience chapter. And one of the things that we talk about when we talk about resilience is, again, resilience and perseverance are interesting because they often get conflated. People think of resilience as, oh, I get knocked down and I keep going. I get knocked down and I keep going. No. Resilience, that's perseverance. Resilience is when I get knocked down, how effectively and efficiently can I get back to baseline? Or when I have something great happen, how efficiently and effectively can I get back to baseline? So resilience deals with this. We think about visually. It's the rubber band that we stretch, and when we let go, it goes back to its original shape. This is extremely important in succeeding and long-term success, because if we get knocked off our baseline and we can't get back to baseline because of some sort of challenge or issue or trauma, we will fall into entropy. We'll slowly go downhill, right? If we have something really great happen to us, right? We succeed, we accomplish something, and we can't get back to baseline, we may fall into complacency and kind of arrogance. Okay, so getting back to baseline is really very important. And when we talk about Hank, one of the things that happened in Hank's development was, he remembers, and I will tell this story because it's a fun one from the book. But when he was about 5 years old, he wanted to have some milk. His mom said, "Go to the kitchen. It's in the kitchen." And when he went to reach for it, it like slipped out of his hand and spilled everywhere. I mean, he said it went everywhere. And he remembers his mom coming to the door, and there was a flash of maybe a flash of anger, maybe for a split second. But then his mom basically had a very calm face and says, "Okay, let's get to it. Let's start cleaning it up," right? And what that taught him immediately was, hey, something bad's happened, but let's just get to work and start. Let's not dwell on the badness. Let's not dwell on the upset. Let's get to work and start fixing the problem. And as people will hopefully read in the book, that really came to light for him when he had some really tragic stuff happen, and he immediately remembered that lesson. So these attributes, again, they're inside of us to a degree when we're born. But we can develop them as we grow older, and oftentimes the experiences that we have as we develop start to highlight these attributes that we're either high on or low on. And again, I will say this: attributes, if we think about these attributes, and in the book I talk about 25, I talk about 25 of them. When we do work with organizations, we actually have 49 attributes, okay? But regardless of the number, we all have all of these attributes. Every human being does. The difference in each one of us are the levels to which we have each. So I usually use adaptability. If we take adaptability and 10 is high and 1 is low, I would say I'm about a level 8 on adaptability. What does that mean? That means when the environment changes around me outside of my control, it's fairly easy for me to go with the flow and roll with it, okay? Someone else might be a level 3 on adaptability, which means the same thing happens to them. It's difficult for them to go with the flow, difficult for them to flex and adapt, okay? They're still adaptable. All human beings are. It's just harder for them. So if we were to kind of line up all these attributes on a wall like dimmer switches, okay, we would all have different dimmer switch settings. All of our attribute settings would be a little bit different. That starts to speak to our individual, unique makeup, our unique vehicle, if you will, and starts to highlight and speak to how we perform in uncertainty, challenge, and stress. Well, really in the world, but especially during uncertainty, challenge, and stress. So what we want to think about is we all have all of them. Our development, our experience helps us understand and highlight the ones we're a little bit higher on, the ones we're a bit lower on, and we learn this throughout. And sometimes we have experiences that really throw us into something that says, "Oh, wait a second, I didn't know I had it." I always say, if you have a story of your life that you can end with the phrase, "I didn't know I had it in me," that's a story of an attribute coming to the fore that you didn't know you had. Yeah, but you're probably high up on.
Yeah. So, taking it to today, what I see a lot is, and you talk about this in the book, people not going through little tragedies
Mhm.
and then being able to handle, things that can just really overwhelm them and
Yeah.
sink them. Uh, is this really what's missing in today? Where do we have it too easy? Are things just, and what is the result of creating an environment of ease for people if we're not experiencing these little tragedies?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and I try to really answer that carefully because I understand that evolution is a thing, and even as you and I were growing up, we're probably roughly around the same age, right? As you and I are growing up, we had a certain environment that we grew up in. That those adults who saw us growing up in that environment looked at us and said, "Well, they have it way easier than I did." And then
Mhm.
our parents, when they were kids, their parents were saying, "Well, they have it way easier than I." So there's always a tendency for us to do that. What I would
Mhm.
say is that life holistically is getting better and easier. We know that, right? There fewer people are dying every day, and we have a ton of things that help us. We don't have to do the same things to acquire those things that we need to survive. We don't have to really work as hard as we used to. But there's always challenges. There's always stress. I mean, we're dealing with stress levels and anxieties that you and I never had to deal with in our childhood, and our parents certainly didn't have to deal with. So today, the populace of today, whether they be you know in their late 80s or whatever, or midlife, or even youth, we're dealing with a different level of stress and anxiety. And so I would never say that we're dealing with less. We just have to understand that the mechanisms to deal with them haven't changed. To deal with this stuff, to be resilient, you have to start looking at, everybody has reasons why they may feel stressed or anxious, or they may feel like they've just been hit with some sort of challenge and trauma. It's really the growth opportunity is how you deal with that, right? And if you effectively say, okay, I'm going to look at this and deliberately work on my resilience for this, you are in a good position. You are practicing resilience. And so in the book I talk about these little tragedies. These little tragedies are everywhere. I mean, it could be the traffic jam on the way to work. It could be the spat with the spouse or loved one. It could be the meeting that went horribly wrong at work. They're everywhere, and we have an opportunity to practice our resilience with these little tragedies, so that when the bigger stuff hits us, the stuff that's going to take a lot longer to come back from, we've exercised that muscle. And so I think that it behooves everybody to kind of look at their little tragedies with a sense of, first of all, I think gratitude, because we don't have the
Yeah.
same little tragedies as everybody else does, but also look at them as a growth opportunity. As little as they are, use them as a practicing tool.
Yeah. When you go through the attributes, what I think you do so beautifully is you go through what we think something is, and then you kind of flip our minds. Like when you describe the difference between discipline and self-discipline, which I loved, and you gave a great analogy of two very different leaders with two very different outcomes. But I think this is important to talk about because in today's world, sometimes we see leaders that are very disciplined, but they lack self-discipline.
Yeah.
And I would like for our audience to really hear about this, because when you come into a business, often what we actually want is both. We want people that have self-discipline and then can actually apply a disciplined approach to their work.
Yeah.
But could you separate those two for us? Because I think a lot of people are conflating those two, and then it gets very messy when we try to help people or coach them. We don't have the ability to look at these things as separate issues, and it makes us actually be not the greatest leader we could be. That's why I believe your book will help you become a better leader when you can clearly define the differences in the
Yeah.
attributes.
Yeah, because it helps you as a leader understand the behavior of those people in your span of care, and that's really one of our primary jobs. But you're right. I mean, so self-discipline versus overall discipline. We could call it outer discipline versus inner discipline if we wanted to. But the discipline that I talk about in the book, it has to do with those goals, challenges, or objectives that we decide upon, and we understand the wickets that are needed to achieve. that the outside world has a say in whether or not we accomplish. So that could be becoming a Navy SEAL. It could be starting a business. It could be being the best singer, being the best surgeon. Okay, any one of those goals, the outside world has a say in whether or not you accomplish it. In other words, you're going to have to navigate what the outside world throws at you to accomplish that goal. Okay, that requires discipline, or outer discipline, if you want to call it that. Okay, then there's self-discipline or inner discipline. Those are that speaks to those goals, challenges, or endeavors that you want to achieve that the outside world has no say in whether or not you accomplish. Okay, so what's that? That could be, I'm going to say, I'm going to eat healthier. Okay, that's a goal. All right, I'm going to decide that, and I can be in Las Vegas next week at the buffet. The buffet is not going to throw pastries at me. Okay, it's all on me. It's up to me. Okay, and so self-discipline requires there's an inner thing that's required for self-discipline, because the outside world has no say. Why does this matter in terms of performance? It's because, and this is how I begin to separate these attributes. I always ask the question, can either of these attributes live independently of each other? So in other words, can you be self-disciplined and not be disciplined? And the answer is 100% yes. And I've known these people. I still know some of these people, right? These are people who their lives are in complete order. They work out every day. They eat the right thing every day. They are completely structured. They know exactly what they're doing minute by minute, and they run their lives like a military machine. They can't get a long-term goal accomplished to save their lives. Okay. Then you have, can you be disciplined without being self-disciplined? And the answer is also yes. I throw myself into this category. Okay. I am actually really good at setting audacious goals and achieving them. Okay. I'm pretty bad at being self-disciplined, like telling myself what to do. Why does this matter? Well, the self-discipline, the person who's really high on self-discipline loves structure and routine. They love the idea of, hey, this is when I do this, this is what I do. It's all kind of structured out. Well, guess what's going to happen if you try to achieve an outside goal or a goal that the outside world has a say in whether or not you accomplish? You are going to be thrown off your routine almost on a daily basis. You're not going to be able to get the workout in one day. You're not going to be able to eat this that day. So highly self-disciplined people have trouble oftentimes with breaking of structure and routine. Okay, that's why sometimes the outer discipline is difficult. Someone like me, I hate structure and routine. I hate being told what to do. Okay, even when it's myself telling me what to do. So I'm very comfortable with things getting thrown at me and kind of navigating and bobbing and weaving. So I'm really good at discipline, but I have trouble with self-discipline. So now, obviously, like you said, the best is a balance between the two. But when you start to understand how these separate, you start to understand behaviors, because some people are high on one and low on another, and it starts to inform how they perform, right? If I can give you one more example of this, because I think it's a really good one. I talk about open-mindedness as an attribute, okay? But I don't very deliberately talk about curiosity as an attribute. Well, people conflate open-mindedness and curiosity as well. They're two separate things. Open-mindedness is a passive acceptance of new ideas and perspectives. Okay, curiosity is a proactive search, right? So the example, Sabrina, is, say you and I head to Japan, and we meet our local friend, and our local friend says, "Hey, I'm going to take you to the most authentic Japanese restaurant." Okay, and you and I say, "Great, that's awesome," right? That's open-mindedness. Or you and I go to Japan, and we go to our local friend and say, "Take us to the most authentic Japanese restaurant." That's curiosity, okay? So there's a proactivity. So here's how we look at this. Can they exist separately? Can you be open-minded without being curious? Well, of course you can, right? You can just be someone who's really open to new ideas, but they're not necessarily seeking out new stuff. You're just open to stuff. Nothing wrong with that. How about if you're high on curiosity, but low on open-mindedness? This actually can get dangerous, right? This is the seeds of conspiracy thinking, by the way, all right? This is someone who knows what they want to know, or knows what they think, and are very curious to find out why they're right. Okay, so leaders who are highly curious and low open-minded, beware, okay? Because these are people who are going to be set in their ideas and will be curious as to prove themselves right. So you can see just out the outset, all these attributes start to interplay in different ways. Just these two alone, when you have polarities in the way they show up, it can show up in how you perform. And I think that's really starts to be a superpower when you're a leader, or especially assessing and selecting people for your team.
Yeah, this is powerful because sometimes I'm in a room and I like to think that I'm a big time observer. And I think part of leadership is to ask questions, to to go deeper than most, to see further than most. And I think that's really important, because without an open mind, you are really just looking for whatever's confirming what you think. And then you're doubling down on your stupidity sometimes. Yeah. And sometimes I see this and I'm like, what are we doing right now? Stop the madness. Yeah. But there's one topic that I think is so popular today, Rich, where I hear this word thrown out so many times, and I wanted to get your opinion on this, because I think people hear catchy words and they like to use it, but they don't really know what it means, and it becomes dangerous. And the word is narcissism. Because, and I want to ask you this, can you be ambitious and then someone thinks you're a narcissist? And then you talk about, actually, we need a little bit of this to do well. Could you extrapolate on this? Because I think it's very important that we stop just lumping people into broad categories, and then that becomes very dangerous.
It certainly does. And we know, I mean, the word narcissism is thrown around. Obviously there's a pejorativeness to the word. And I would say, you asked if we need a little bit of narcissism. It's not just need. All of us have a little bit of narcissism, and here's why. And again, I love etymology, right? There's like entomology's bugs, etymology's words, right? I love etymology, so I love diving into the etymology of words. Narcissism, as a very basic definition, is the desire to stand out, be recognized, and be adored or feel special. Okay, every single human being on this planet at some point in their lives wants to stand out, be recognized, be adored, or feel special. In some capacity. So every single one, it's a very human response. Every single one of us wants to. So I thought about this, and then I actually got a copy of the DSM-5, which is the psychological Bible, which goes through all the psychological disorders, and it has a couple pages on narcissistic personality disorder, which is what a lot of people assume when they hear narcissism. They think about the disorder, right? So I got a copy of this, and I started looking at how it defines the disorder. And in this book, they have about 9 criteria, 9 sentences that you read. And the idea is the physician is supposed to go through these 9 things. And if they can answer yes for the patient to 5 or more, then the patient is considered disordered, right? They consider to have the disorder. Well, really, there's only about 6% of the population who actually have the disorder. Anyway, just for fun's sake, I went through these 9 things. I started reading them. And as I went through them, I recognized, first of all, I didn't have 5 or more. Okay, thank goodness. However, I was not innocent of all that I was reading. In other words, there were a couple things that I read. There are a few things I was like, well, sometimes I think that, sometimes I act like that. So then I went to I went a little bit deeper, and I said, okay, let me ask myself this question. Why did I become a Navy SEAL in the first place? Okay, I was a 22-year-old kid. Of course, I was a patriot. I wanted to serve my country, and I wanted to, serve in the military. But ultimately, if I really, really, really was honest myself, one of the primary reasons was because I wanted to see if I could be a badass. I wanted to see if I could do something that very few people could do. Then I asked my buddies, why did you become a Navy SEAL? And they basically said the same thing. Of course, they were patriots. Of course, they loved their country, but they wanted to see if they could do something very few people could do. There's seeds of narcissism in there, okay? And so this is why it's a driver, because one of the things that helps us, that drives us to set some of these very audacious goals in the first place is this level, right? Why else would you want to be the best singer, best surgeon, best teacher, okay? There's an element there. Now, it has to be metabolized correctly, okay? Because narcissism overdone is a bad thing. However, they've done studies on some of the top entrepreneurs on the planet, okay? And every one of them has fallen high on the narcissism list. Now, again, not disordered necessarily. Some of them might be disordered, certainly, but all of them fall a little bit higher, right? The entrepreneur mindset is part of that, right? So this is really, like you said, this is about understanding ourselves at a human level, admitting the humanness of all of us, and not just saying, oh no, I'm not that, and saying, wait a second, I have a little bit of that in me. Can I use it and metabolize it correctly to actually actualize some of the things I want to do? And the answer is yes. And I think narcissism is one of those things.
Yeah, I'm so into this. I have a background in science, and I wanted to be a doctor. Then I got into business, and I applied everything that I knew about science to business. And guess what? It works. What is true in one area is true. It flows very nicely.
Actually, Sabrina, let me add this because you'll like this. There's neuroscience that backs us up, right? When we are getting paid attention to or adored. So when an infant, for example, is getting paid attention to or adored by their parents, They are getting bursts of dopamine, we know, motivation chemical. This is good, keep doing this, very powerful. Serotonin, which is a binding chemical, also feels good. And then oxytocin, which is a neuromodulator that bonds and binds us, right? When we're getting paid attention to, we're getting all three of those. Okay, it doesn't change when we're adults. Okay, when we get paid attention to and admired, it feels good. Okay, so there's neuroscience behind this. It's a bonding experience. So that there's science that backs us up as well.
Yeah, and you also described this, that when someone is clapping for you, that person is receiving those chemical responses, but then because you're clapping, you're a part of that and you're also receiving it. And I think today that's what's missing in people. Like we're like almost ashamed to celebrate people doing great things.
Right.
When really, when you can't do that, there's something that you're missing out from watching great people do great things and participating in that. So I think that's really important. And I want to ask you this, because oxytocin really does bind us and makes us long for that feeling a whole lot. What happens to people when they're insecure? Can you have, because I see this with people, can you have something that is an insecure narcissist?
Oh, yes. And I think that's where you get into the dangerous, when you start getting into the dangerous levels of narcissism, but also arrogance, right?
Yes.
There's always insecurity, right? People always say, arrogance is always a sign of insecurity. Dangerous levels of narcissism is always a sign of insecurity, which means, I think, at least my opinion, having grown older now, that the way to deal with that is with empathy first, okay? Because you can, and this is a problem. Arrogance was something that always triggered me, and you can say arrogance and narcissism too. It always triggered me because I hated it. When I saw it in someone, I was like, oh my God, it triggered me. But then I was having lunch with a good friend of mine, and he was a top performer dude, and he deals with top performers. We were talking about triggers. And I told him arrogance was one of mine. He said, it's interesting. When I see arrogance or narcissism, immediately I think insecurity. And a light bulb went off in my head. It's like, holy crap, this is exactly it, right? There's a reason why this person is expressing themselves the way they are. There's insecurity there. So can I be empathetic enough to help understand why that person might feel insecure? But insecurity, especially deep insecurity, can be the seeds of some very negative manifestations of these attributes. So we got to be real careful.
Yeah. And, talking about empathy, I think this flows very nicely into what you specialize in, which is leadership. And I think that's where people can feel, if I go into organizations that put energy into leadership, I'm going to grow, I'm going to develop. One of the most reassuring things that I feel about businesses in America is, because I've worked with a few Navy SEALs, is that I know that you guys do consulting for businesses, and it makes me so happy because you guys, I always had this perception that you guys are so tough, so strong, but when I get to know you, you're just amazing human beings, and it's really refreshing. And you talk about this when you get into like that bravado, and you talk about, I loved what you talked about with cunning, how people will think that's a negative trait, but it's actually a way that you're able to outwit and be able to achieve things in ways that other people can't think of it, because you're using more of a creative energy as opposed to like bravado and like, I'm going to toughen my way out of this.
Right.
Could you talk about that today, for really go deeper? This is what I want the audience to do. You hear these words and you're like, oh, I don't want to be with anyone cunning. Yeah. But I don't know, that might save your life one day.
Yeah. Well, cunning is an interesting one because it's a huge attribute for Navy SEALs, obviously. But it can be a pejorative word because people think of cunning as deceit or lying or doing things malevolently. There's certainly ways you can use cunning malevolently. There's also ways you can use cunning benevolently, right? So in other words, Bernie Madoff was a malevolent cunning, right? Whereas Oskar Schindler was benevolent cunning. Okay, cunning at its basic level is simply thinking outside the box. That's what it is, right? And so the cunning mind approaches problems. So first of all, cunning has to involve a problem. Okay, creativity and innovation, that's not necessarily a problem. The problem doesn't have to exist for creativity and innovation, but cunning always needs a problem to solve. Okay, but the cunning mind will look at a problem and immediately ask three questions. The first question is, are there rules and boundaries? The second question is, are they real or are they perceived? And then the third question is, if they are real, what happens if I break them? Okay. And then the cunning mind will start to go about ways to solve a problem that are outside regular thinking. An example, and I give this example in the book, is a kind of a fantasy example, but you can imagine a king whose princess is locked in a tower that's guarded by a dragon, and the king wants to save his daughter, so every evening he sends one of his best fighters to go slay the dragon and rescue the princess. And every night to say, hey, slay the dragon, rescue the princess, slay the dragon, rescue the princess, until one day the Navy SEAL shows up, and the Navy SEAL says to the king, hey, what's the mission? And the king says, I want you to save my daughter, the princess. He says, well, who cares about the dragon? Okay. And the Navy SEAL goes about saving the princess without dealing with the dragon at all, right? This is a kind of example of sometimes we look at a problem and we think that there are rules and boundaries around that problem that actually don't exist. And so cunning is simply a way of thinking that gets you outside of those rules and boundaries. And yes, sometimes rules have to be bent, maybe even broken, but you're always weighing those consequences. And that's how certainly Navy SEALs think, but we can also think of it in ways that can be used very, very with great benefit to others, like Oscar Schindler.
Yeah. And it goes down to just how you think. And that's why you're able to execute so flawlessly, because it's simple, and simple is hard. We live in a very complex, complicated world. And the more they can complicate it, the more we get like emotionally unstable. But if we can just get back to the foundations and keep things simple, we can execute more beautifully.
Yeah.
In terms of you going into leadership and going into businesses, what would you say are attributes that are missing today in a business? I know this is like a very broad question, but I'm in my business, but after going to 5,000 organizations, do you see a reoccurring issue in an attribute way that maybe has a simple solution?
The answer is yes, but it doesn't have to do with specific attributes. So what I see as a reoccurring issue is an inability for organizations to understand what attributes they need in their organization. So what we do is we go into organizations and we help them understand what that master attribute list looks like for their organization, because it's going to be unique to them, right? The master attribute list for a sales team is going to look different than the master attribute list for a SEAL team or a teaching team or a athletic team or a surgical team, right? So what I found is a commonality in most organizations that they have had trouble articulating their culture in a way that they can actually find the people who fit their culture. So we talk about culture in an organization. All culture is a consistent pattern of behaviors in a team or organization. That's what culture is. That's what makes up a culture. Well, those behaviors, those patterns stem from values and belief systems, for example, right? And those values and belief systems stem from the attributes we bring to it. And so what we help teams and organizations do is we help them extract from those values and from the behaviors we talk about the actual attributes required to be at that organization. And what that allows them to do is immediately understand, okay, now I know exactly what I need for specific roles from an attributes perspective. Because once you have that master list, you can say, okay, from this master list, what does the CEO need from an attributes perspective? And what does the starting intern need? Those lists are going to be a little bit different, but they're still based off that master list. And then they can actually performance evaluate more effectively. And they can say, hey, wait a second, now I can see if people are kind of on the right seat on the bus. I had this happened to me. I was commanding officer of a SEAL squadron, and I had, of course, a group of SEALs, but I had support, logistics, supply, things like that. My supply team was about 8 people, half of which were dedicated to future acquisitions and kind of going and finding stuff, the other half to record keeping and administration. I had a sailor, she was not performing. She was in the future acquisitions thing. She was not performing very well at all. Morale was coming down. I brought her into my office and we started to have a conversation. This was after I'd done the attributes work. And within about 10 minutes, I recognized that her unique attributes didn't fit what she was doing at all right? But her attributes totally fit the other thing, right? So I just moved her from future acquisitions to record keeping administration, and her performance skyrocketed, right? So this is not necessarily about getting rid of people, although you could use it as a tool to see if people are a right fit, but it's also about putting people in the right position in your organization. And then it also allows them to hire and select the people that they need, right? Because now we know, okay, well, we're gapped in these attributes. We need to go specifically find people with these attributes so we fulfill the team, we fill out the team responsibly and appropriately. So the biggest common problem I see is people just, they don't know what soft skills are, and they don't know how to articulate it, and they don't know how to find what they need for their specific culture.
Yeah, and this is so important for people to understand, because we sometimes just want certain people to do a certain role, and we just shove them into that role, and they're just not equipped to handle it because they're lacking the attributes. And it's not, but just to tie this all together beautifully, and for people to really go get your book, it's so important, especially if you're a leader, to get your hands on this book and to start going deeper. Most people today, they're learning through Instagram. They read a quote and then they go think that they like know something. No, let's go deeper. But I would love for you to talk about this to get people inspired to self-reflect, right? When you talk about skill, like people can teach us skill, but for me to develop an attribute, like if I want to pick the attribute of decisiveness, and, is it me that has to decide to become more decisiveness, or could anyone on the outside force me to become more decisive?
Right. And the answer is no. No one can force you. You have to. So to develop an attribute. So here's actually a quick trick for everybody to understand, or to decide or determine whether or not it's an attribute or a skill that they're dealing with. Okay. Ask this question: can I teach it, or can it be taught? If the answer is yes, it's probably a skill. If the answer is no, it's probably an attribute. So someone could say, well, I want to learn how to shoot free throws, from a foul line, right? Well, a basketball player could probably take someone out there and start to teach them that skill in a few hours. You could learn how to shoot free throws. That's a skill, okay? Or someone would say, I want to learn how to be more patient or more decisive, okay? We can't teach, no one can, you can't go to a class to become more patient, right? So developing an attribute that you're lower on takes three things. First, it takes an awareness. I need to know I need to develop it. It takes a motivation or desire or need, right? I need to develop this. I'm motivated to develop it. Because just because you're low on an attribute doesn't mean you have to develop it, depending on what you're doing in life. So you have to have a motivation to develop. And then the third most important is you have to go find environments that test and tease and develop that attribute. Patience is an easy one. If you want to develop your patience, go find environments that test and tease your patience, whatever that looks like for you. That could be, I'm going to deliberately drive in traffic. I'm going to stand in the longest line in the grocery store. I always say have kids. Having kids will develop patience, right? But the same thing goes with decisiveness. And decisiveness, and this is where you pick that attribute, because decisiveness, people think this is not about making decisions, okay? Making decisions is actually a skill. You can teach people processes to make better decisions. Decisiveness has to do with the speed and efficiency with which you make decisions, right? So if you're higher on decisiveness, it means that you have an ability to get to garner the appropriate amount of information and make a decision, right? With efficiency and effectiveness, okay? Not recklessly, but with efficiency and effectiveness. So to practice your decisiveness, if you're low, you simply have to start putting yourself into environments that are going to require you to make quicker, more effective decisions, and practice that and develop it.
Wow. And that's beautiful, because leadership, you said this really, really well. Leaders are watched more than they are heard, right?
Oh, yeah.
So those environments are environments where you have to lead by example. What you want to cultivate, you better be doing it.
Yes.
I love that. I started off when we first met saying, I don't know how I'm going to condense this. And we literally just scratched the surface, but I really do recommend, I read a lot, Rich, and I do recommend your book very, very highly, because I think it's time for us to go deeper as a group of human beings if we want to be optimal. And I love what you say about peak performance. And I've switched my vocabulary too. I'm not trying to peak and then fall. Just want to be optimal all the time and stay consistent. Even if I do fall, get back up. So thank you so much for your time. If I'm a business, and I want to reach out to you and I want to learn more and I want to bring you into my business, how would I do that? How would I go find you? First, I know I want to read your book to understand what you're going to be able to bring, but then how would I contact you to be able to connect with you to hire you?
Yeah, the best and easiest way is just go to the website, theattributes.com, and you can find everything there. You can actually find the book. You can find our free assessment tools. You can figure out where you stand on some of these attributes, at least the grit, mental acuity, and drive. You can fill out a type form if you would like to work with us, and we'll get back to you pretty rapidly. So everything's at theattributes.com, and you can take a visit and check everything out. So, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk to you today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.